Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Bridge course in English Literature that is offered by the Department of English of Yashwant Mahavidyalaya Nanded. In this video, we are going to talk about the fiction and its types. Basically, literature has many forms like poetry, prose, drama, etc. The prose alone has many subforms like fiction, short story, non-fiction prose, essay, etc. Prose fiction, commonly known as novel, is one of the major forms of literature. Novels have been widely read and read all across the world. To understand and appreciate the prose fiction, it is necessary to know its important elements. The elements of prose fiction can be broadly divided into content and form. The content refers to the story, message, and relevance of the prose fiction, while the form refers to the plot, narration, and language of the prose fiction. The basic elements of prose fiction are theme or the story, plot, characterization, conflict, locale or setting, symbols, narrative style or pattern, point of view, and so on. When we look at the word fiction is opposite to that of fact, because fiction would mean imagination. So fiction suggests something that is imaginary and not based on facts. But in fact, fiction, as in any art form, is imitation or representation or reaction of some concrete or imagined situations, which could be short fiction or short story, or novella, which is slightly bigger than short story, or proper novels. Normally, a short story goes to the extent of a few pages, especially 2 to 5. Novella runs across 80 to 100 pages, and novels proper occupy 150 or more than pages. The two main types of fiction are literary and commercial. Commercial fiction attracts a broad audience and may also fall into subgenre like mystery, romance, legal thriller, western, science fiction, and so on. For example, Bridges of Madison County by Robert James Waller, produced by Warner in 1992, was a hugely successful commercial novel because the book described the fulfillment of a romantic fantasy that is dear to the heart of millions of readers. Written in a short, easy to read style, the book was as mesmerizing to a 15-year-old, maybe to all the 15-year-olds, as it was to 100-year-olds. Other blockbuster commercial fiction authors include John Grisham, Sidney Sheldon, Daniel Steele, and Jackie Collins. Literary fiction, on the other hand, tends to appeal to a smaller, more intellectually adventurous audience. A work of literary fiction can fall into any of the subgenres described in the following sections. What sets literary fiction apart, however, is the notable qualities it contains, excellent pace of writing, originality of thought and style that raise it above the level of ordinary written texts. The recent work of literary fiction that enjoyed wide popularity was Cold Mountains by Charles Frazier. Other popular writers of literary fiction include Toni Morrison, Barbara Kingsolver, John le Carre, and Saul Barrow. The commercial fiction is also called as the popular fiction. So, in general, fiction can be of two types. One is popular or commercial fiction, and the literary fiction. Let us look at each of these points with some great detail. Theme or subject matter or context becomes the most important element in a fiction. A prose fiction or novel is a long narrative about the life of people. To depict the lives of people, it is essential to depict the environment in which they live. The story in a novel can be about a person or a group of persons or about a nation and its people or maybe the entire universe. This depiction of people situated in specific contexts may aim at certain messages to be delivered for the readers. Thus, the story and its message are known as the theme or the subject matter of the fiction. The story takes place in some part of the world in some time framework. This leads to the context of the fiction. The context includes the political, social, economical, cultural, religious, and geographical conditions that shape and affect the lives of the people. Not only of the people, but about whom the fiction is written, but about those who have written it and those for whom it has been written for. That is, the characters in the fiction, the author of the fiction, and the contemporary or maybe the future readers of that fiction includes the context. The second important part of fiction is plot. The plot is the artistic and systematic arrangement of the elements of a story. The writer has to choose the sequence of the arrangement of the story elements he wishes to tell to his readers. This selection depends upon the kind of story that he wants to write. Even if it is a small, straightforward story of some person or persons, a writer cannot depict all incidents in the life of characters. He has to choose specific incidents and arrange them in a particular sequence. Sometimes the novel begins with the middle events of the story and continues to reveal the following events, but also tell about the events that have taken place in the past or earlier. Sometimes the story begins with the end and goes on revealing the happenings from the beginning. There are two types of plot: a simple plot and a complex plot. When there is only one story with beginning, middle, and end, it is called as a simple plot. But when there are other stories that are implanted in the main story, the plot becomes a complex one. The development of the plot can be shown in the form of this triangle that is given to us by Freytag, which is commonly called as the Freytag's triangle. Number 1, introduction or beginning or initiation. This gives rise to the conflict as the pyramid rises. Due to conflict, we have a rising action. The rising action takes us to the climax of the novel. Once the climax is reached, then we have the falling action. The falling action gives rise to the resolution, ending in denouement or conclusion. So a good plot begins with the beginning and ends with the denouement or conclusion with conflict, rising action, climax, anticlimax followed by the falling action, resolution, and having a proper ending. So, the plot will have an introduction or the beginning or the initiation. This is the first stage or phase in the fiction. In this phase, the characters and setting or locale are introduced to the readers. These characters have their interests or motives which they want to achieve or protect throughout the novel. This is followed by the conflict, which is the result of clash of interest or perspective of the characters. When the characters in the story interact with each other and their surrounding, they find their interests or motives clashing with the motives of others. This clash is of two types. When the clash is between two motives or interests of the same person, it is known as the internal conflict of the character. When the clash is between two people or group of people or between individuals or maybe a group of individuals and society or culture or law or religion or nature, this conflict is called as the external conflict. Due to conflict, we have the third part of the plot, which is the rising action. As the word rising suggests, the conflict among the characters leads a story to its progressive movement till it reaches the next part of the plot called the climax. The most important event in the story is known as the climax. There could be multiple climaxes in the story, which will lead to the fourth part, which is called as the resolution. After the climax, the story moves towards the resolution of the conflicts. These solutions might come through the clearing of the misunderstandings, through some intervention by some authority or agency, followed by the conclusion or the denouement. The last part of the novel is known as the denouement or the conclusion. However, the ending or denouement of the novel is authorized by the timing of the resolution. If the resolutions to the conflicts come in time, the novel gets a satisfactory or happy ending. If the resolutions come later, that is, after the conflicts have harmed the lives of the concerned people, then the novel ends on a tragic or a sad note. The third part of the novel is called characterization. The characters are the agents of action. The story in the novel progresses with the acts and moves taken by the characters. The craft of the writer lies in the art of characterization. A writer has to represent characters in terms of age, sex, physique, social, economic, and cultural setup, and also the status, followed by the various systems of belief and ideologies. E.M. Forster provides characters broadly into two different groups. One is the flat characters, the other variety are the round characters. The flat characters are those characters that do not change in terms of behaviors and ideology throughout the story, while the round characters display remarkable transformation during the course of study. The characters also present various virtues and vices like bravery, love, benevolence, trust, friendliness, malice, greed, treachery, and so on. The characters that are depicted conveniently and conventionally are known as the stereotype characters, which are mostly the flat type of characters. The stereotype or flat characters like clowns, foolish or showy, meek or brave, and so on, where they behave in a typical way, come whatever the situation would be. The characters can be divided according to their roles in the story. The prominent character, usually the hero or the heroine, is known as the protagonist. The opposite of protagonist is an antagonist, which is usually the villain. The fourth important aspect of a novel is the setting or the locale. Characters in a story do not exist in vacuum. They have to be placed in some geographical location. They also have to be placed in some social, cultural, or political setup. At the same time, the characters have to be placed in some time framework. Thus, the setting is physical and chronological. Physical dealing with the place of action and chronological dealing with the time of the action. This location in which characters are placed is known as setting or locale. The setting provides various dimensions to a novel. There are some novels which are famous for only the setting. For example, R.K. Narayan's novels are known for a specific locale, an imaginary place from Karnataka called as Malgudi. Typically, these stories are filmed for television as Malgudi Days. The Victorian novelist Thomas Hardy is also known for his novels set in Sussex or Wessex provinces of England. His novels are called as the regional novels or Wessex novels for the same reason. The fifth important aspect of a novel is point of view. A story or tale is told or narrated by some narrator. The role and position of the narrator or speaker decides the point of view. If the narrator of the story is also one of the characters, he narrates the story from the first person point of view. The narrator uses the first person pronoun like I to narrate the story then. This is known as the first person narration or the first person point of view. When the narrator is not one of the characters of the story and narrates the events as a third person observer or narrator, it is known as the third person narration or third person point of view. As the third person narrator talks about the opinions and even inner thoughts of the characters, it is known as the omniscient or the all knowing narrator. Most of the novels are written from the third person point of view. The autobiographical novels, on the contrary, are written from the first person point of view. The next interesting feature of a novel is the linguistic devices that the narrator uses or the novelist writes. Like poetry, prose fiction also deploys various linguistic devices for the aesthetic and communicative purposes. The figures of speech like irony, paradox, oxymoron, personification, simile, metaphor, symbols, and archetypes are used to enhance the effect of the novel in the narrative. The special effects can be used by the novelist, like the reworking of myths or legends is in the popular fiction, the use of elements of wonder and suspense as one observes in the detective novels or the science fiction, the use of horror and grotesque as one observes in the gothic fiction, the reworking of history in the historical fiction are some of the examples of the use of special effects that are used in the fiction. All these special effects are to attract the reader's attention. Talking about the prose fiction and its types, we have a number of types like the autobiographical novel, Bildungsroman type of novel, campus novel, epistolatory novel or epistolary novel, gothic fiction, historical fiction, magic realism, naturalism, novella, picaresque novel, science fiction, sentimental novel, and stream of consciousness type of novel. Let us look into each type of novel with some detail. The first is the autobiographical novel. An autobiography is a story of one's life written by oneself. In this type of novel, the narrator records the events and incidents in his real life in his own words. The story may include the real names and places associated with the real life of the narrator, or they might come in disguised form. The reliability of the narration depends upon the conscience of the writer. Mahatma Gandhi's My Experiments with Truth is a celebrated autobiography. The autobiographical novel does not reveal the true names of the characters and places associated with the narrator, but many a times disguise them, as we observed in Samuel Butler's autobiographical novel, The Way of All Flesh. The second type of novel is titled as Bildungsroman, or the Bildungsroman, or Bildung in German means education, Roma means novel, is a German term for education. The novel that depicts the growth of a character or characters along with their development and progress through education, either formal or informal, is termed as Bildungsroman novel. It is known as the novel of formation or a novel of education. It focuses on the psychological and moral development of its main character or the protagonist. Rudyard Kipling's Kim and James Joyce's A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man are the examples of Bildungsroman novel. The third is called as the campus novel, which is a novel set on the university campus or a college campus. Kingsley Amis' Lucky Jim is a campus novel. Epistolary novel, means the novel of letters. A novel that is written in the form of letters exchanged by the characters is known as epistolary novel. Samuel Richardson's Pamela or virtue rewarded is the famous example of epistolary novel. The fifth variety of fiction is the Gothic fiction, which is a story full of supernatural elements, usually set in the haunted places like the remote castles or deserted houses, graveyards or ruins, and full of weird experiences, which are typically known as the Gothic fiction. The novels of Horace Walpole, as we see in The Castle of Otranto, Mrs. Radcliffe's Mysteries of Udolpho, and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein are some of the most important examples of Gothic fiction, of which Walpole's Otranto and Radcliffe's Mysteries of Udolpho are noteworthy here. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein has motivated the filmmakers to make a film on it. The sixth variety of novel is the historical novel, which takes an incident or incidents or people from the history of recent or distant past and develops the narrative around it. The author may add some imaginary incidents or people in the story along with the actual incident. Walter Scott's novels deal with the historical aspects of Scottish history. Scott popularized the historical fiction, and so he is typically termed as the historical novelist. Magic realism, as the word implies, is a mode of narrating fantastic stories in a realistic or a rational manner. The supernatural is made to believe to be common, realistic, and natural. It's a combination of dreams, fairy tales, and mythologies, along with the everyday common events in this life of the characters. Gracia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude, and Michael Ondaatje's The English Patient are beautiful examples of the novel of magic realism. Salman Rushdie's novels also, along with Amitav Ghosh's novels, are also typical of magic realism. This is followed by naturalisms, the novels that reject the idealized experiences and present experiences as they are with all the natural effects experienced in the course of life of the protagonist are said to be naturalistic novels. The French novelist Émile Zola is credited with the trend of naturalism. The extension of the naturalistic novel is the realistic novel. Naturalistic novel presents the natural experiences of the protagonist. And the extension of the realist novel is surrealistic novel. First, we have naturalistic novels with Émile Zola's representation, followed by the realistic novel presenting the realism as it exists in the society, followed by the surrealistic novel that is going beyond realism. Naturalism, realism, and surrealism are the modern trends in writing novels. Novella is a story that is longer than a short story but shorter than a novel. Joseph Conrad's masterpiece, Heart of Darkness, is a typical example. Similarly, Ernest Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea is also an example of novella. George Orwell's Animal Farm is a famous novella. In fact, all the three, Conrad's Heart of Darkness, Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea, and Orwell's Animal Farm are wonderful, famous masterpieces in novella type of writing. A picaresque novel presents the life story of a trickster. The word picaresque is taken from a Spanish word picaro, which literally means trickster, someone who cleverly deceives the people by weaving stories that seem very real and authentic. People easily believe such stories and sympathize with their narrator. Daniel Defoe's Moll Flanders, Henry Fielding's Joseph Andrews and Tom Jones, Laurence Sterne's The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy are very famous picaresque type of novels. Science fiction, as the name suggests, deals with the stories of the imaginary, technological, or scientific advances that may not become realities but do not deny the possibility in the distant future. are called as science fiction. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is the earliest example of Gothic fiction and also science fiction. The novels of H.G. Wells, like The Invisible Man and The Time Machine, are beautiful examples of science fiction. The sentimental novel is one that depicts the impact of the world upon people who are sensitive and emotionally open and obedient to every emotion of their moral sense. Henry Mackenzie, through his novel The Man of Feeling, introduced the sentimental novel to England. Other important sentimental novelists are Oliver Goldsmith's Vicar of the Goldfield. I'm extremely sorry, Goldsmith's Vicar of the Wakefield. Stream of consciousness is a phrase that is coined by the psychologist William James. It refers to the flow of thoughts in the waking mind of the people. The thoughts of the waking mind do not progress in a straight line. Many a times they go into the past and also into the future. They go back and forth continuously. They are not logical or rational all the time. The novel written employing this mode of narration, where many a times the protagonist goes into the past, goes into the future, sometimes in the present, and a perfect combination of past, present, and future thoughts is called as the stream of consciousness novel. In fact, it becomes very confusing when we keep on moving into this time scale. The novelists like James Joyce have written beautiful stream of consciousness novels like Ulysses. Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse, Mrs. Dalloway are the famous examples of stream of consciousness novels. With this, we come to the end of this video. Thank you very much for watching this video. Hope you had enjoyed the session. Let's meet in the next video. Bye for now.